Hey guys, welcome to Focus Performance Training. Today I want to dig into a question that I got asked on a Q&A I did on Instagram, on my Instagram story yesterday. And there was a question that was, is back squatting detrimental, or is the back squat detrimental exercise for weightlifting or weightlifters in general? And my answer was quite long. I got asked in a follow-up to actually go through and break down that question in a little bit more detail on a video because the response was too long for a story. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to dive down into that question. I'm going to explore that conversation as well and sort of where it originated, the thought process for back squats being a null and void exercise for lifting, like you don't have to do it, and the reasons why you might want to keep back squatting in your program. Okay, so the question I got asked yesterday was, is it true back squatting is useless for weightlifters? And I'm going to dig into that in as much depth as I can today to sort of break down that question and why I think that's a little bit of an elitist, not an elitist statement, but a very naive statement. So this whole thing for myself really originated, it was probably around October last year. Angus Bradley put up a post that was rocking the boat, and he sort of admitted that himself, around the need or this obsession for weightlifters to back squat in their program. Now, he raised some very good points that if we're looking at to develop leg strength, there are other ways that might be that create less systemic fatigue or less energy, and we can sort of push our energy more towards the specific components of weightlifting, being maybe a front squat, which is more specific to a clean or snatch pulls. And that's a very valid statement. If we look at it as an energy conservation or an energy directive point, we look at like our cup, and I've talked about this before, sort of in the cup of energy or the cup of recoverability, okay? So we have a finite amount of energy we can sort of dedicate to all things we do throughout a week, month, day, whatever time block you want to choose. We need to be very specific when it comes to preparing athletes for weightlifting or at the higher end, how we spend that energy. The less the athletes weighing on the performance, the outcome of that event, the less we have to worry really about where we spend that energy in the crux of it. We are going to want to be as efficient as we can when it comes down to time constraints as well, but that's a rough guide. So if we look at it from that standpoint, we can remove the back squat from our weightlifting program, and we can still find strength or get strength in our legs in other variations. So long as we drive this systemic or get a systemic adaptation or stimulus to the body in the same way. One way that you could theoretically do this is maybe take out a back squat for a safety bar squat. Maybe replace that with a leg press or even a hack squat as well. So there are just different variations that we can put it to. The caveat with that is that a lot of weightlifting gyms don't really have access to leg presses or very good leg presses or even hack squats as well. And safety bars are a speciality bar, and not everywhere has one. So then we come back to the same thing again. Well, a back squat can fit the mold logistically. Now, it also comes, the question needs to be answered is, what phase of training do we want to include or omit the back squat? It might be a worthwhile venture to omit the back squat in the last 2 to 4 weeks in the lead up to a competition, because it's not a competition specific movement. You may be better off getting your squatting volume through a front squat, with the caveat there is that if the front squat isn't beating up your wrists and your shoulders excessively, because you'll probably be doing a lot of cleans and a lot of jerks in that position already. So that needs to be consideration there, that we're not overloading that front rack position and causing injuries or overuse injuries to, for example, our elbows and our wrists. So if that is occurring in your athlete, then yes, it may be a requirement to use a back squat, but you could also go through and use a safety bar, because it's going to mimic the upright position of upright torso that you'll be in your clean and your snatch a lot more closely than a back squat. The big difference in that angle is that where the load is placed on our torso. Because the front squat's placed across the front of our shoulders here, it's going to allow us to keep a much more upright torso. If we compare that to a back squat on our back, we're going to have a forward lean in order to accommodate where the weight is placed and to keep balance over our feet. So that's a key thing here, the angle of our back. And that, because we know that training joint specificity needs to be adhered to have carryover or some dynamic correspondence. And all that means is that the weight, the training that you're doing in the gym or the accessories is carrying over to your actual sporting movements. And it can be very easy to blur the line of weightlifting, because It's all weightlifting essentially, but we need to keep in mind that there are 3 movements: snatch and the clean and jerk together. They're the movements that we need to judge their success or their proficiency on. So for myself, I think back squats are an excellent option in sort of a further away. So if we look at a 12-week block, for example, those first 8 weeks, you can use a back squat. The volume that which you use that back squat is completely dependent on what the athlete needs. For example, if the athlete comes from a powerlifting background and has quite a big back squat, albeit probably a low bar, we know they have the prerequisite strength, the ability to recruit higher order motor units, probably the appropriate cross-sectional area being the size of the muscle. So we don't really need to load that back squat as much. We would most likely want to get them more into a front squat at a higher percentage, because we're going to need to re-ingrain that movement pattern and that position for our snatch and our clean. For that athlete, I'd be biasing overhead squats and front squats versus back squats. However, for a complete new lifter and someone who doesn't have a whole lot of strength training, a back squat can be a very good method in which to build leg strength in the absence of other equipment. Now, we can also argue that you could use a belt squat machine if you have that, but again, not everywhere has that. At the end of the day, it is a tool to develop leg strength, and it can develop back strength as well. And what it also can do is develop someone's ability, their mental strength under a heavy bar to be able to grind out a rep. It's much, much harder to grind out a front squat, because generally you'll be weak in the quads and your back will take over and your back will round very quickly and the bar's going to go to the floor and you're not going to win. Whereas in a back squat, there is a greater potential to grind out a rep. So it is my hypothesis that generally people will be able to move a back squat a little bit slower, therefore grind for a little bit longer to achieve a successful rep. That can help us with heavier loads, being able to incorporate the bounce from the bottom, and to generally build our leg strength, because we're going to have a greater time under tension and we're going to have a greater strain in the body through those movements. So my stance on this originally was no, every weightlifter has to back squat, but in fact, not every weightlifter has to back squat. Not every weightlifter has to do anything but snatch and clean and jerk if you really break it down to the laws of specificity. But if we incorporate variability into that as well, we need to incorporate a fair amount of variation in our lifts and in our programming so that we don't increase the level of monotony, i.e. doing the same thing over and over again, increase the level of strain, which is a product of monotony, all right, and so that our lifters can enjoy their training. I mean, what's wrong with enjoying back squatting and wanting to work towards a double body weight and a half, or even just a 200 kilo back squat? There is nothing inherently wrong with that. And in fact, it is going to be quite advantageous to have a good back squat and be quite strong. But there needs to be that question of how strong is too strong. You'll see the greatest weightlifters in the world, i.e. Lasher, doesn't really back squat that much, because there's no added benefit to him being able to squat 400 versus being able to squat 360. There's no benefit to him being able to squat 380 versus 360. He's strong enough as it is. His time and energy needs to be spent, albeit his technique is almost perfect, but in those main lifts, getting stronger and practicing those main lifts so he can get better and better at them. It all falls down to what stage of training your athletes are, how strong they are, where their weaknesses are, what you have access to, and it's a massive layered approach. There's a few ways we can look at it. We can look at it from the bottom up, what does the athlete need to achieve, and then top down, what do we have access to in order to achieve that. So I'd strive to anyone who has sort of very black and grey or black and white statements, about this sort of thing, challenge yourself and think, well, maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. Come up with arguments for and against, and you'll probably find yourself in a better ground so you can make a more well-rounded, intelligent decision when you do give advice. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this has been a little bit insightful around what could have been quite a, progressive or, very, what's the word I'm looking for? I've lost the word I'm looking for. Polarizing point of view. It could be a very polarizing perspective and create a fair bit of sort of criticism from left and right. Again, guys, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'll go through and answer them like I did. And the feedback I got in the Q&A was excellent, so thank you. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.